My sister and I have never been close. Some siblings grow up as best friends, looking out for each other, but that wasn't our dynamic. She always saw me as competition. Everything was a race: grades, sports, who got more attention from our parents. And the worst part? She almost always won. It wasn't because I wasn't smart or hardworking. I was. But in our family, she was the golden child. The one who could do no wrong. The one our parents bragged about to their friends while I was just there. If I got an A on a test, she got an A+, and somehow that was all that mattered. If I made the basketball team, she made captain. If I landed a decent internship, she landed one at a Fortune 500 company. I learned early on that fighting for recognition was pointless, so I stopped trying to impress anyone but myself. I focused on my own goals, made my own plans, and worked my way up in my career without expecting any applause. Then, the job opportunity came up. It wasn't just any job, it was the job. A dream position at one of the top companies in our field. A 6-figure salary, incredible benefits, and an opportunity that could change my entire career trajectory. I had spent years building up my experience for something like this. So when I found out my sister was applying for it too, my stomach dropped. She hadn't even mentioned being interested in the job before. But I had. I had talked about it at a family dinner, excitedly sharing details about the company, the role, and my upcoming interview. She had nodded along, playing indifferent, acting as if she wasn't paying much attention. But 2 weeks later, I overheard her on the phone with a friend, bragging about her big upcoming interview at the exact same company. I shouldn't have been surprised. This was classic her. The moment I wanted something, suddenly she had to have it too. She didn't care about the job. She cared about winning, beating me. At first, I tried to stay positive. We were both qualified candidates, and I was confident in my skills. I told myself that if I worked hard and nailed the interview, I had just as good a shot as she did. But then, I learned something that changed everything. She wasn't just competing with me, she was playing dirty. She had connections at the company. Friends of friends who could pull strings, push her application to the top of the pile, and casually put in a good word for her with the hiring manager. She wasn't relying on talent, she was using shortcuts. And suddenly it all clicked. She didn't just want the job, she wanted to take it from me. She wanted to win again. But if she thought I was just going to roll over and let her walk all over me again, she had another thing coming. Because this time, I was taking control. My sister Lauren always had to be the best at everything. If I was good at something, she had to be better. If I wanted something, she had to have it first. And if I ever did manage to outshine her in any way, she made sure our parents never forgot who the real star of the family was. It started when we were kids. I remember winning a school art competition in 4th grade. I was so proud of my painting. I had worked on it for weeks. The moment I showed my parents, Lauren conveniently discovered her passion for art. Suddenly, she was spending all her free time drawing and painting, getting expensive supplies while I was left with the basics. Within a year, she was winning competitions, and my parents had completely forgotten about my artwork. That was just one example, but it set the tone for the rest of our lives. When I got into an advanced math class in high school, she had to take it too, except she got tutoring and extra help to make sure she was better than me. When I got my first job at a coffee shop, she applied to a higher-paying retail store and made sure to rub it in my face. Our parents, of course, only encouraged this dynamic. They praised her every move, comparing me to her at every opportunity. Why can't you be more like Lauren? Look at what Lauren is doing. Why aren't you aiming higher? Even when I did something impressive on my own, their praise always had a but attached to it. By the time we were adults, I had stopped competing with her altogether. I had accepted that no matter what I did, she would find a way to one-up me. It was easier to focus on myself and let her have the spotlight. But this job opportunity, this was different. This wasn't just some competition or sibling rivalry. This was my career, my future. I had spent years working my way up, learning everything I could, and gaining real experience in my field. I had taken on internships, networked, and studied my ass off to get where I was. This wasn't some game. This was my chance to prove myself. Not to my parents, not to Lauren, but to myself. And now, Lauren was swooping in to take it from me. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe she really was interested in the job. Maybe she had been planning to apply all along and just never mentioned it. But then I found out about the connections. Lauren wasn't just applying. She had people inside the company vouching for her, pushing her name to the top of the pile. She hadn't earned her place as a top candidate. She had secured it through shortcuts, through favors, through the same entitled attitude she had always had. And the worst part? I knew she wouldn't have gone for this job if it weren't for me. She had a good position at her current company. She wasn't even looking for new opportunities until I mentioned this one. She didn't need it. She just wanted to take it from me. I tried to talk to my parents about it just to see if they would understand my frustration. Big mistake. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," my mom said, waving me off. "If Lauren gets it, you should be happy for her." "She's your sister," my dad added. "It's not a competition." That was rich coming from them. I wanted to scream. Of course, it's a competition. To her, it always had been. And just like that, I realized I had two choices. I could sit back, play fair, and let Lauren use her connections to steal the opportunity I had worked my ass off for. Or I could do what I had never done before. I could fight back. I wasn't about to let Lauren waltz into this job without a fight. She had taken things from me my entire life: attention, opportunities, and recognition. But this was different. This wasn't some school competition or a childhood rivalry. This was my career. I spent years working for this moment. I had the skills, the experience, and the passion for this job. I refused to let her cheat her way in just because she had connections. If she wanted to play dirty, fine. I wasn't going to stoop to her level, but I was going to outsmart her. First, I needed to figure out exactly how deep her influence ran. I started doing some digging, casually asking around in my industry circles. Turns out her connections weren't as strong as she made them seem. She had a couple of acquaintances inside the company, but they weren't high up enough to make hiring decisions. That meant she was leaning on reputation and favoritism rather than merit. I had an advantage. While Lauren was busy name-dropping and trying to network her way into the position, I was doing the real work. I researched everything about the company, its goals, its leadership, and its upcoming projects. I found out that they were pushing for innovation and wanted candidates who could bring fresh ideas to the table. Lauren? She was relying on the usual polished resume, perfect interview charm, and vague leadership buzzwords. She wasn't actually offering anything new, just the same cookie-cutter responses that worked for her in the past. I needed to make myself undeniable, so I spent every waking hour preparing. I crafted a pitch, a real, actionable plan that the company could implement. I built a presentation outlining how I would bring fresh ideas to their team, backed up with research and case studies. If they were looking for someone to transform their department, I was going to show them that I was the only candidate who could do it. Meanwhile, Lauren remained oblivious. She was confident, too confident. She thought she had already won. At one point, she even made a snide remark at a family dinner saying, "I'll let you know how the job is once I start," like it was already a done deal. I just smiled, let her think she had it in the bag. When the interview day finally came, I walked into that office not as a nervous candidate, but as someone who belonged there. While Lauren was relying on charm and name-dropping, I delivered a compelling, well-researched strategy that left the hiring panel genuinely impressed. At the end of the day, I knew I had done everything right. Lauren had underestimated me, and soon she was going to realize just how big of a mistake that was. The day the hiring decision was announced, I could feel the tension in the air. I hadn't heard from the company yet, but I knew the decision was coming soon. Lauren, of course, was acting like she already had the job in the bag. She walked around with that smug confidence, making little comments about how it's all about who you know, and how interviews are just a formality. I just kept my mouth shut and waited. Then the email came. "Dear, my name, we are pleased to offer you the position of job title at company name." I read it twice, making sure I wasn't imagining things. I had won. All the hours of research, preparation, and effort had paid off. They had chosen me. Not because of connections, not because of favoritism, but because I was the best candidate. Lauren, on the other hand, she was about to get the biggest wake-up call of her life. I didn't tell anyone at first. I wanted to see how this would play out. That evening, I went over to my parents' house for dinner, just like usual. As soon as I walked in, Lauren was already gloating. "So, did you hear anything yet?" she asked, sipping her drink like she already knew the answer. I shrugged, keeping my face neutral. "Not yet. You?" She smirked. "Well, I was supposed to hear back today, but I'm sure they'll call me soon. These things take time." I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Dinner went on, and my parents were already acting like she had the job. They were congratulating her, talking about how proud they were, how she was always destined for success. I sat there quietly, waiting. Then her phone buzzed. I watched as she excitedly checked the screen. Her face fell instantly. "Oh," she muttered, staring at the email. "What is it?" my mom asked, concerned. Lauren forced a laugh, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "It's nothing, just, they went with someone else." My dad frowned. "What? That doesn't make sense. You had connections there." Lauren just sat there, stunned, like she couldn't believe this was happening. I took a slow sip of my drink, then casually pulled out my phone. "Huh, that's weird. I actually just got an email from them." I opened the email and read it out loud. "We are pleased to offer you the position of..." Dead silence. Lauren's face went red. My parents just stared. "You got it?" my mom finally asked, disbelief in her voice. I nodded, smiling. "Yeah, I guess they were looking for someone with a real plan." Lauren's mouth opened and closed like she wanted to argue, but what could she say? She had been so sure that her name-dropping and connections would win her the job, but in the end, I had beaten her, fair and square. She stormed off, making some excuse about needing air. My parents didn't say much after that. Maybe for the first time, they realized that their perfect daughter wasn't always the best. But I didn't stick around for long. I had a real job to prepare for. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing in Lauren's shadow. She was standing in mine. Winning the job felt incredible. But the real victory wasn't just about landing the position. It was about finally proving to myself that I didn't need shortcuts, connections, or favoritism to succeed. I had done this on my own, and no one could take that away from me. But of course, Lauren didn't take the loss well. For the first few weeks after the decision, she was silent. No gloating, no smug remarks, just avoidance. She didn't call, didn't text, and even skipped a couple of family dinners. My parents were oddly quiet about it too, like they were still trying to process the fact that I had won for once. Then, out of nowhere, Lauren snapped. One day she showed up at my apartment completely unannounced. The second I opened the door, she stormed inside like she owned the place. "This isn't fair," she hissed, crossing her arms. I just blinked at her. "Excuse me? You stole that job from me." I actually laughed. "Lauren, I didn't steal anything. I prepared. I worked for it. I earned it." She scoffed, pacing back and forth. "I was supposed to get it. I had people on the inside. They wanted me." I shrugged. Apparently, they wanted someone who actually had a plan. She glared at me, but I could see the cracks forming. For the first time in her life, she had lost. And not because of bad luck or a mistake, she had lost because I had been better. That's when she said something that nearly made me lose it. "Mom and Dad think you should give it up." I froze. "What?" "They think it would be the right thing to do," she continued, as if this was the most logical argument in the world. "I mean, you know this job was more important to me. You could find another one, but this was mine." I stared at her, completely floored. "You actually think I'm going to give up a 6-figure job because you want it?" She lifted her chin. "It's what family does." I let out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. "No, Lauren, family supports each other. Family doesn't spend their whole lives trying to tear each other down. You don't get to sabotage me for years and then act like I owe you something." Her face twisted in anger, but before she could say anything else, I opened the door. "Get out!" She hesitated, her eyes flicking to me like she was hoping I'd change my mind. I didn't. After a long pause, she huffed and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That was the last real conversation we had for a long time. My parents, of course, took her side. They didn't outright say I should quit, but they made it clear that they wished I had. I stopped going to family events as often, choosing instead to focus on my career, my friends, and my own happiness. And honestly, it was the best decision I ever made. Lauren eventually moved on. She found another job, but it wasn't as good as mine. Every now and then, I hear from extended family about how she still complains that I stole the opportunity from her, but I don't care. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one in her shadow. I had stepped into the light, and I wasn't planning on going back.